The real reason there's no women in F1. F1 is a sport that's been dominated by men and men only. Although women have had a small impact in the past, when a total of 5 individuals of the female gender were direct participants in the sport, with one of them even winning an F1 race, it's not common for the sport to see women in the highest competition of the racing. There is a separate category for the sport called Formula W, and we are seeing one dominant force there called Jamie Chadwick that won the championship on her first try at the age of 19 and repeated that success 2 years later at the age of 21. She is currently the leader in the championship, and when asked why aren't there any women in the sport, she had an interesting approach to the problem and was positive that the situation will improve in the future. Stick around with us to find out more regarding this matter. First, let's take a short trip in history and talk about women's impact on the sport. Although small, we must say that it was an impactful one. The last woman that raced in the sport was Lella Lombardi in 1976. She is also the only woman that finished in the top 6, having done so in 1975 at the Spanish GP. Maria Teresa de Felippis is the first woman that raced in the sport, having done so in 1958. But back then, we know that society was pretty misogynistic when it comes to women and their rights, and in a time when women were barely allowed to go outside without companions, them racing in a sport highly anticipated by men was something that nobody would want to see, unfortunately. Even the race director at that time said, "The only helmet a woman should wear is the one at the hairdressers." A couple of more women tried out their luck in the sport, such as Davina Galicia from Great Britain, who also has a resume when it comes to racing, and she is teaching young and prospective drivers how to drive an F1 car and is a former Olympiad. The other woman is probably the one that left the biggest mark in the sport, winning a Formula 1 race in Britain. The last one on our list is Giovanni Amati. And that's it. That's the list of women that have participated in F1. There have been some tryouts when it comes to women participating in the sport, and the latest one has been done in 2014 with no other but Sophie Wolff, Toto's wife. Sophie has tried her luck in Williams in a couple of free practices, but unfortunately, she couldn't make it with the big guys. Now, a dominant force has emerged from Formula W, and that is Jamie Chadwick, which we mentioned earlier in this video, and she comes from the UK. Her fellow Briton, Lewis Hamilton, who is the most dominant figure in the history of the sport, alongside Michael Schumacher, has said that the women in the sport are something that he finds truly motivating and inspiring, adding, "I've been following the W Series all year, and for the last few years. I've been trying to get down there because I wanted to go and meet the young inspirational women there. I've been watching their races in between sessions, so I really wanted to go down there," said Hamilton, who then continued, "I feel it's great that we have the W Series, but we as a sport need to do way more for young girls getting into the sport. For these women, there's no progression from the W Series. It's been 3 years, and we need to really work on trying to create something. When you win that, do you progress into Formula 2 or get a seat in F2, whatever it may be? We can definitely do a lot more to support those girls," said Hamilton. Apart from this, Hamilton has spoken about the women's presence among the stewards and how their number is so low. Although it's not about women being present in the sport, it surely is a step in the right direction. As Hamilton added, "I want to see more women in the stewards' room. Last year we had maybe 1 or 2. It would be awesome to have a male and female as the 2 race directors. I just want to add, we need to make sure we've got non-biased stewards. Race drivers, some are very good friends with certain individuals, some travel with some individuals, take a more keen liking to someone. I think F1 needs people who have no biases and are super central when it comes to making decisions," finished Hamilton. Apart from him, Daniel Ricciardo has also called the sport out for not bringing enough women's involvement. Jamie Chadwick has spoken about this issue and said that nothing would delight her more if she could make it to F1. However, the path to F1 is truly a thorny one, and she would probably have to go through categories like F3 and then F2. Plus, in a capitalistic society, she would have to have huge support behind her if she wants to make it into the big scene, and that couldn't be done if her performance isn't on a top-notch level. The ultimate goal is to be in those championships, ideally Formula 2 and then Formula 1. I don't know what is actually possible. To get into Formula 1, you have to go through the feeder series, Formula 3 and Formula 2. and it's extremely physical. Formula One is extremely physical, and we don't know exactly what women are capable of in the sport. If you're aged 15 or 16 and go into car racing without power steering and driving big heavy cars, a lot of women do struggle even though they have been successful in go-karting. We like to think that women can make it, and I am happy to be the guinea pig and will do my best to push and explore the options to Formula One. But we don't know. There hasn't been a woman in the recent era that has done it. I'm trying to understand whether that is to do with the physical side. If it's physically possible and women can compete against men, how do we make that happen? However, if it's physically too hard, but the sport wants women to compete, then we have got to bring it back and understand why, said Chadwick, who is also a development driver for Williams. Jamie Chadwick also spoke about the technical regulations in the sport, saying that if the sport wants to see the return of female drivers in the sport, there have to be more changes regarding this matter. She does believe that people who run the sport are misunderstanding the physical human performance, adding, "I don't think it is just as straightforward as getting stronger in the gym and jumping in the car. Although our sport is incredibly advanced with a lot of things, the physical human performance side is misunderstood. In Formula 2 and Formula 3, the steering wheels are all identical and they have a thick grip. How can we make them thinner because women's hands are not necessarily that big? How can we make sure there are no restrictions on how close the pedals are so you can get the right leverage? And some of the newer tubs in the cockpit are really narrow. Women with bigger hips can't fit into them comfortably. A lot of these things have been overlooked for obvious reasons, but now we need to see whether that does make a difference to performance," finished Chadwick. Chadwick has spoken about her hero in the sport, which is logically Lewis Hamilton, saying that nothing would delight her more if she could be his teammate. Although she said that he'll probably beat her without a bigger challenge, she said that it would be a huge honor to showcase her abilities against a 7-time world champion. Yet we have to stay realistic and see how things really stand. Jamie was making a point when she said about the regulations not favoring women. But in a sport that has such strict regulations when it comes to such fine things, making different cars for women just goes to show that their place isn't primarily in the sport, as they would have to keep racing in the Formula W categories. Chadwick has finished with an optimistic note, saying that nothing would delight her more to see a woman in the sport, even by the price of the first woman not being her, but she could be used to pave the way for her colleagues. "I would like to think in the next 3 to 4 years we will see a female driver in F1. There is a lot of talent that is younger than me coming through that could have great success, but there are details within the sport that have been a limiting factor previously. Trying to understand those and changing them, even if that is not for me but the next generation coming through, is going to be important," finished the 24-year-old Briton driver who has 2 championships behind her name at such a young age. What do you think about this matter? Let us know in the comments below.